a nation that never faced bombs on its capital, never lost its factories, and was once dismissed as a regional economy, ended up writing the rules for global money. How did the US dollar rise to the top of the world's financial hierarchy? Not through accident, but through strategic position, industrial planning, and economic leverage born from global crisis. Before 1914, global power and finance were dominated by imperial heavyweights. Britain and France were the world's political and economic referees. London was the financial capital of the world. The pound sterling was the most traded currency, and Britain controlled the largest colonial empire, supplying itself with cheap raw materials and guaranteed export markets. France mirrored this model, commanding major territories in Africa and Asia, backed by colonial administration and military presence. The global economy ran on empire networks, shipping routes, and gold reserves. Gold was the anchor. Currencies mattered only if they could be exchanged for it, or were protected by empire muscle. But America was not following Europe's colonial script. While European empires expanded outward, the United States invested obsessively inward. From the 1880s into the early 1900s, the US built the most aggressive industrial economy the world had seen. It expanded steel plants, oil drilling, railway networks, electricity grids, port capacity, and mass manufacturing ecosystems. The strategy was clear: own the production before owning the world. By 1900, America had overtaken Britain in steel production, coal output, and manufacturing scale. This rise was powered by entrepreneurs, engineers, and workers, not monarchs. The US didn't inherit dominance. It manufactured capability to earn it. But despite this internal boom, the dollar still wasn't global money yet. It avoided long-term alliances, conflicts, and foreign entanglements. This posture, known as isolationism, was not fear. It was strategy. America wanted to build itself into a fortress of industry before stepping into global chaos. Its two ocean barriers made invasion almost impossible, allowing it to grow without foreign disruption. Then came the World Wars, the reset button that changed the hierarchy forever. WWI and WWII didn't just damage Europe and Asia, they bankrupted their production advantage. Cities flattened, railways severed, industries repurposed for survival, and currencies inflated uncontrollably. And America was waiting, fully prepared, holding the factory keys, the shipping routes, the credit lines, and eventually, the currency the world would adopt. The dollar didn't rise because others were reckless. It rose because America planned for a world where others would have no option but to rely on its infrastructure, its markets, its production, and its financial credibility. The wars would change everything, but America had already built the stage it would later perform on. When the US entered World War I and later World War II, it entered them from a position of production potential, not destruction pressure. Europe and Asia were fighting for survival. America was fighting for contracts, industry scaling, and strategic relevance, a very different war economy. The new industries that made America uniquely powerful. The wars forced the US to innovate at scale, giving birth to industries that didn't just win battles, but redefined America's long-term leadership position. Military aviation manufacturing. WWI triggered the first major investment into aircraft programs, but WWII turned America into the world's largest aircraft producer, building around V-300,000 military planes. This wasn't expansion, it was industrialization of air superiority. Synthetic rubber and polymer industry. When Japan captured Asian rubber supplies, America engineered rubber in labs and mass-produced it for tires, boots, vehicle parts, and aircraft wheels. This made the US the only country that could replace a major global raw material through chemistry and mass production, large-scale shipbuilding. America pioneered standardized cargo ships, especially Liberty ships, 2007-10 built during WWII. These ships supplied Britain, opened invasion fronts, and created a new logistics manufacturing sector that operated like clockwork. Pharmaceutical scaling. Penicillin wasn't invented during the wars, but America industrialized it into mass production, stockpiling 2.3 million doses by 1944, creating a battlefield medical manufacturing edge no other nation had. The Atomic Science Industrial Complex, the Manhattan Project, turned nuclear physics into a government-private industry sector, creating enrichment plants, laboratories, and new military R&D pipelines. The employment revolution the wars created. Before WWII, America was coming out of the Great Depression with high unemployment. The wars changed that overnight, but again, not by accident, by total labor absorption into wartime industry. Why? Millions of men were recruited into new industrial jobs making artillery, rail equipment, uniforms, trucks, and aircraft parts. This became even more dramatic. Unemployment dropped to 1.2% by 1944, one of the lowest in American history. Jobs increased because factories multiplied production lines, not because the economy magically improved. Women were absorbed into manufacturing in millions, replacing male labor deployed to battlefronts. The war economy created a nation that was fully employed, fully productive, and fully monetized through production, exports, and lending. How this made America different from every other nation. Other nations were bombed, had broken factories, needed rebuilding, printed money to survive the war, and borrowed capital after it ended. When World War II reached its peak, America had become the largest industrial producer on the planet. It wasn't just making weapons, it was making them at a scale that turned the war into an economic rocket. Unemployment dropped from 14% in 1939 to 2% in 1944 because every able body was absorbed into production. Factories that once built consumer goods were now producing war machinery. The economy was no longer shrinking, it was multiplying production lines. America's biggest advantage, announcing power in one moment. In 1945, the US deployed its ultimate new invention from the war era, nuclear weapons. Dropping the atomic bomb on Japan was the geopolitical exclamation mark that ended World War II. The bombs forced surrender without needing a land invasion, proving that the US could end a war faster than any empire could sustain one. Imagine a neighborhood fight that's been going on for weeks. Everyone's houses are damaged, shops are closed, and people are losing money daily. Then one guy in the neighborhood has been quietly building a massive warehouse, far from the chaos. When the fight is still dragging, he pulls out a device no one has ever seen. Something so powerful it ends the fight instantly. He didn't just stop the fight. He proved he had the biggest leverage, the best planning, and the final say. In this analogy, the neighborhood fight on World War II damaged houses and closed shops, destroyed economies. The guy with the warehouse, Jair America. The device that ends the fight instantly, by atomic bomb. The real investigation. The bombs were not only weapons, they were influence. They created fear-based respect from rivals, confidence from allies, negotiation leverage for decades, a signal that America had stepped into a new era of unmatched deterrence power. Other nations were rebuilding cities. America was announcing systems, alliances, and influence. So the truth most people miss, America didn't lead because others were reckless. It led because it was the only nation that could invent the end of a war, employ its population fully through industry, and step into peace. Negotiations with both economic momentum and military leverage intact. America's power position after 1945. When World War II ended, America held a rare double advantage. It had the only nuclear weapons on Earth for 4 years, 1945-1949, and an economy that was expanding while others were rebuilding. This meant the US could influence world order from strength, not recovery. It controlled the terms of lending, trade, alliances, and even global economic criticism. The psychological and diplomatic leverage of nuclear monopoly. America's nuclear monopoly didn't mean it had the most bombs forever, but it meant it had the first fear advantage. Nations and rivals understood one thing clearly. The US could not be threatened without consequence. This changed global diplomacy. Even critics now had to calculate their tone carefully because America had the muscle to punish defiance and the wealth to reward loyalty. Imagine you become the only person in your city with a technology so powerful that even the richest families and toughest gangs can't challenge you directly. For 4 years, you walk into every negotiation knowing no one can intimidate you. But you don't rule by fear alone. You also become the only person funding rebuilding projects, giving business loans and supplying goods. Some respect you because they fear your power. Others respect you because they need your supply. Most follow you because opposing you becomes expensive. In this analogy, had to city the world after World War II. Technology no one can challenge won America's nuclear monopoly, funding rebuilding and supplying goods. US economy untouched and booming. Critics silenced because opposition is costly. Transactional diplomacy. America's military superiority beyond nukes. Even without nuclear weapons, America had already outgunned everyone by 1945. It had the largest navy on Earth, most advanced long-range bombers, most scaled aircraft manufacturing, most powerful war logistics infrastructure. So dominance was never one weapon. It was stacked strength. Comcon, the forgotten challenger that failed. In 1949, the Soviet Union launched Comcon, an economic alliance for communist nations, built to push back against Western financial influence. The intent was clear: build a bloc that could resist the dollar system. But Comcon failed to dismantle dollar dominances because it had no global markets. It had no liquidity to lend internationally. Its economies were inefficient. It relied on Soviet direction, not shared trust. Once the Soviet economy weakened, the alliance fragmented and collapsed in 1991. The real truth: America didn't dominate because monarchs were reckless. It dominated because it was internally built on merit, industry, planning, and scalability. It stacked a military superiority plus economic reward. It owned home systems, not just weapons, and it emerged from war as the only nation that didn't need rebuilding. When 44 countries gathered in 1944 at the Bretton Woods conference, the world thought it was designing a recovery system for everyone. In reality, it was designing a system that would work, mostly through America's balance sheet. How Bretton Woods worked in America's favor: the US arrived with the largest gold reserves in the world, the biggest untouched industrial economy. The agreement created 3 core rules. 1. All currencies would be pegged to the US dollar. 2. The US dollar would be the only currency convertible to gold at a fixed rate. 3. The IMF and World Bank would issue reconstruction and development loans, mostly in USD. So while other nations tied their currencies to gold indirectly, America tied the world to add the dollar directly. The US didn't just join the system, it became the system's anchor. The dollar after 1971. The plot twist: in 1971, America removed the dollar from gold convertibility. This wasn't reckless, it was strategic. US spending on wars and global operations was outpacing its gold supply. Countries were starting to redeem dollars for gold, which threatened to drain US reserves. So America closed the gold window down to protect the vault. Not because it was broke, but by then, the world was already holding dollars for trade and reconstruction. So the dollar survived on global demand, market liquidity, financial trust, and America's unmatched post-war production momentum. What is the petrodollar? The petrodollar system is not about America printing money. It's about America pricing the world's most traded commodity, oil, in US dollars. In 1974, the US made a strategic deal with Saudi Arabia and OPEC. Oil must be traded in USD only. In exchange, America would provide military support and stability guarantees. Oil profits would be recycled into US banks and US Treasury bonds. This created a permanent demand loop for USD. If you want oil, you must hold dollars. If you sell oil, you bank in dollars. If you bank in dollars, you buy US assets. How America benefited from the petrodollar. America gained global dollar demand independent of gold, strengthened US banking sector, massive foreign investment into US debt, control over oil trade currency flow, strategic political loyalty from oil nations. Why BRICS will fail to break US dominance. BRICS is an alliance of diverse and economically uneven players. It faces internal mistrust, political instability in key members, no unified financial infrastructure, no shared currency belief system, infiltration in competing national agendas, no single economic engine like America had in 1945. A reserve currency is built on trust plus liquidity plus stability plus systems plus demand. BRICS may talk loudly, but it lacks the internal foundation to replace the dollar's role collectively. America didn't need unity to rise. The world needed unity to recover. And America provided the currency they all agreed on. America's system leverage after World War II. By 1946, America had stepped into global leadership not because others failed, but because it had built the capacity to scale when others were collapsing. Its influence now came from systems, not speeches. Bretton Woods, America, hosting the new money era. Bretton Woods created a world where currencies were pegged to the US dollar. The dollar was the only gateway to gold. IMF and World Bank lending would run mostly in USD. This meant America controlled global lending rules, reconstruction funding channels, international trade currency flow, and global financial trust, BRICS everyday equivalent. It was like hosting a peace meeting where you also own the yuan bank vault and the only store everyone must buy from. The meeting was for the world, but the payment method was yours. America's wartime economic engine, turning crisis into momentum. During the wars, US factories produced weapons, planes, ships, medicine, synthetic rubber. Jobs exploded. Unemployment disappeared. Industrial output surpassed all rivals. Gold reserves stacked higher than all nations. This gave America the momentum to say, we can rebuild you, we can lend to you, we can supply you, we can protect you. And the currency for all of this will be the dollar. BRICS everyday equivalent. It was like a man whose business is booming during a citywide disaster. He hires everyone, lends money to rebuild, supplies every shop, and becomes the financial landlord of the city without asking for permission. WWI ends, but America ends it on its own terms. In 1945, America didn't just negotiate peace, it will force peace by dropping the atomic bomb. The nuclear monopoly that followed made sure no country could bully the US. No country could invade the US. No country could ignore the US. And no critic could speak without consequence. BRICS everyday equivalent. It was like being the only person with a weapon, no gang, no billionaire, no kingdom could challenge for years. The respect wasn't requested, it was unavoidable. The prime's IMF and World Bank in America's backyard. Having these institutions headquartered in the US meant global loans were designed, approved, and distributed under US economic influence. Countries borrowing had to hold dollars for repayment. Rebuilding countries bought American goods using dollar loans. US banks received deposits from reconstruction funds. And America influenced economic policy indirectly through loan conditions. BRICS everyday equivalent. It was like having the loan office built next to your house, where all loans are issued in your own currency, spent in your own shops, deposited in your own banks, and critics don't dare question you because you're both the lender and the supplier. Removing the dollar from gold was strategic. America didn't drop gold backing because it was reckless. It dropped it because gold reserves were finite, US spending was global, redemption for gold was draining US reserves, and the dollar was already the most used currency. So America said, we don't need gold to back the dollar anymore. The world already backs it by demand. It was like realizing you don't need a receipt to prove your brand anymore because the entire market already believes in your product more than alternatives. The strategic shift, merit versus monarchies. While Britain and France once ruled by monarchs and colonies and inherited status, America ruled by industrial merit, market creation, strategic positioning, system design, financial liquidity and military deterrence. America's leaders were not born into crowns. They were born into systems that rewarded capability and scale. Europe inherited kingdoms. America engineered companies and systems. The monarchs ruled the world before 1945. Merit ruled the world after 1945. And America had built merit into its economic DNA. The US didn't just rise from crisis. It converted crisis into global momentum, built alliances through economic supply and protection, and redesigned global finance around its currency. America didn't control the world by gold or by bombs alone. It controlled the world by building the system the world had to plug into. And the plug was the dollar. When the US entered World War I and later World War II, it entered them from a position of production potential, not destruction pressure. Europe and Asia were fighting for survival. America was fighting for contracts, industry scaling, and strategic relevance, a very different war economy. The new industries that made America uniquely powerful. The wars forced the US to innovate at scale, giving birth to industries that didn't just win battles, but redefined America's long-term leadership position. Military aviation manufacturing. WWI triggered the first major investment into aircraft programs, but WWII turned America into the world's largest aircraft producer, building around V-300,000 military planes. This wasn't expansion, it was industrialization of air superiority. Synthetic rubber and polymer industry. When Japan captured Asian rubber supplies, America engineered rubber in labs and mass-produced it for tires, boots, vehicle parts, and aircraft wheels. This made the US the only country that could replace a major global raw material through chemistry and mass production, large-scale shipbuilding. America pioneered standardized cargo ships, especially Liberty ships, 2007-10 built during WWI. These ships supplied Britain, opened invasion fronts, and created a new logistics manufacturing sector that operated like clockwork. Pharmaceutical scaling. Penicillin wasn't invented during the wars, but America industrialized it into mass production, stockpiling 2.3 million doses by 1944, creating a battlefield medical manufacturing edge no other nation had. The atomic science industrial complex, the Manhattan Project, turned nuclear physics into a government-private industry sector, creating enrichment plants, laboratories, and new military R&D pipelines. The employment revolution the wars created. Before WWII, America was coming out of the Great Depression with high unemployment. The wars changed that overnight, but again, not by accident, by total labor absorption into wartime industry. Why? Millions of men were recruited into new industrial jobs making artillery, rail equipment, uniforms, trucks, and aircraft parts. This became even more dramatic. Unemployment dropped to 1.2% by 1944, one of the lowest in American history. Jobs increased because factories multiplied production lines, not because the economy magically improved. Women were absorbed into manufacturing in millions, replacing male labor deployed to battlefronts. The war economy created a nation that was fully employed, fully productive, and fully monetized through production, exports, and lending. How this made America different from every other nation. Other nations were bombed, had broken factories, needed rebuilding, printed money to survive the war, and borrowed capital after it ended. Today there is speculation that BRICS will end the dollar dominance. That is unlikely to happen because, like its predecessor, the Comecon, that collapsed in 1991 because it lacked economic efficiency, it lacked shared trust, it lacked global liquidity. It depended on Soviet direction, not merit. And once Soviet power fell, the alliance fragmented. It proved this truth clearly. Alliances built without stable economies, liquidity, and internal trust eventually collapse. And currencies tied to them collapse too. It was like a group of friends, starting a business club to compete with a billionaire's company. But some friends have no capital. Some are bankrupt. Some don't trust each other. Some are unstable. The alliance collapses before the competition even begins. We still have a long way in the American dollar dominance. There is no other challenger in sight who can take over in the near future. America is still on the rise. America didn't make the dollar dominant by luck, or by other nations' misfortune alone. It did it by planning inward before planning outward, outgunning the world militarily, and out-inventing the world industrially, monetizing crisis into momentum, hosting the institutions that financed recovery, replacing gold demand with oil demand, and building financial systems that made the dollar the world's default economic language. The dollar didn't become the world currency because America was lucky. It became the world currency because America was prepared to lead, positioned to scale, and powerful enough to never be challenged militarily or financially during the world's weakest moment.